about 2 years after that, the cycle was normal. And gradually, I noticed 1 month it was very heavy. And then it just started slowly getting heavier and heavier and heavier. Body was aching in agony. And I would go to work, and at my lunch breaks, I would be sleeping in my car. It was so bad I could barely function. And at the time, I kind of wasn't really sharing this like with my employer or anything like that. And I remember several times where they were trying to write me up, you know, because, or do disciplinary action because I was struggling getting to work late, struggling to stay focused, struggling to actually do my work and keep up with all the tasks because I just could not function under the birth control. So so the gynecologist changed the prescription a couple times, tried different meds, different dosages, lower estrogen, higher estrogen, no estrogen, progesterone, all of these things, and none of it worked. And so they sent me to a specialist, and it was like the same thing. Nothing worked. And so I ended up getting connected with a doctor. At the time, I was living in Rhode Island, and I ended up going to Boston and getting connected with Leahy Hospital and seeing a gynecologist there. And they suggested maybe trying a different kind of a birth control. So they have one where it's called a Mirena, and it's something that's put into your body, and it's supposed to be like a better form, less side effects. So I had that done, and within a couple days, same thing. The side effects from it was horrible. I couldn't function. So this whole span of time was like a year and a half, and I was just extremely anemic. And so I finally said, you know what, I have to just get off all of this. And so I told the doctor that I just can't do this. I can't function. And so because I had a Mirena at the time, which is something that's put into your body, when they went to take it out, they couldn't. So I had to schedule an outpatient surgery and have it surgically removed. And while they were doing the surgery to just remove it, the gynecologist was like, well, I'll go in and check to see, maybe you have endometriosis. Maybe there's just something else going on in there. And so they checked. There was no endometriosis. There was just nothing else other than some small fibroids, and that was it. And so after the Mirena came out, the bleeding stopped, and then just went back to my normal cycle of heavily bleeding. And so I just continually kept taking iron supplements, and it was like I couldn't take enough. And so eventually, fast forward a couple years, the my primary care doctor suggested I see a hematologist. So I did, and they suggested maybe I need to get iron infused. And so I made an appointment at a hospital in Rhode Island to get the iron infusions done, and it's done through an IV. And so I went in, just like, you know, just normal procedure. They do this all the time. I sat down, and it was funny at the time because I remember the nurse telling me, well, we do these all the time. No one ever has a reaction. and she was kind of joking about it. In the likely event that anything happens, blah, blah, but nothing will happen. This, is an infusion center. We've never had any issues. You'll be fine. So they put in the injection of the iron, and within 2-3 minutes, I started having a severe allergic reaction. And my entire body started going numb. I couldn't feel anything. It was like my body literally just started shutting down, and my blood pressure went up, my heart started racing. And some people might say, oh, well, maybe it's because it's nerves, but I wasn't nervous at all. It was like my body was doing all sorts of things and I couldn't control it. And I just felt like I couldn't even keep my eyes open, and I can feel like the numbness just moving all the way up, and it was paralyzing. And I started telling the nurse, something's really wrong. I said, something's wrong. And so they realized I started to really have a reaction, and my blood pressure was really going wacky, like everything. And so they had to call a rescue and give me medication to try to reverse the reaction. And it was just really bad. And so at the end, this was like this whole long process, and it finally was, the reaction finally stopped. I was like drugged out of my mind because of all the meds that I received to try to stop the reaction. And the nurse was like, well, I guess you're not coming back. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I said, you know what? A couple months later, I said, I have to do something. And the doctor suggested, well, maybe you should go back to Leahy because they had seen you before. And maybe, they can do something different. Maybe they have a different kind of medication they use for the iron infusions. So I went to Leahy and to their infusion center after seeing the doctor. And when I got the injection of the iron infusion, I could feel the reaction coming on again. And so, but they were smart and figured out how to mix the iron with the with counter drugs to counter the reaction. But the only downside about that was I was basically like knocked out the whole infusion. And so they were just very strong, but it killed the reaction. And as the iron infusion, they had to do it very slow, so I was there for like a long time. Something that takes like 20 minutes was like a 2-hour ordeal. But I did several of them. I was doing them twice a week, and eventually after like a month or so, we checked the iron levels. They started to go up, so I went through another round, started to go up. And so I did this periodically, through for a year or so to just bring my levels up. And so after that, I was kind of doing okay with the cycle, but then it just went downhill again, and it just went right into heavy bleeding. And so I went back to the doctor. They started doing scans, and they said, well, we see these small fibroids, which the prior doctor had noted, but they said it's so small, it shouldn't even be doing anything really. It shouldn't even really be affecting you. But if you want, we can go in and take it out. And so I was like, you know what? Maybe that's what I need to have happen. And so they went in, and I remember seeing a specialist because at the time I was 34. I think I was 34 going on 35. And I remember the doctor telling me, once we go in to do the surgery to remove the fibroids, we're not sure how that would affect you in terms of if you wish to have a child later on in your life. And she said, I remember the doctor telling me, you know, you've had so many complications, so many issues. Getting pregnant would probably be very difficult, but we will just try to save your uterus. And so when they went in to do the surgery, they did a myomectomy, and they were only expecting to remove 4, 5 small fibroids. But when they went in, they actually removed 13 fibroids, with the majority of it being inside the uterus. And any kind of surgery that's like inside the uterus is, one, dangerous because of the fact that you could really bleed out during the surgery and might need a transfusion or something like that, or you can damage the uterus where you're not able to have children. But she was an amazing surgeon, and she was able to do the surgery and save the uterus. And so after that surgery, there was a marked difference, as should be, with my cycles. And so the bleeding, the heavy bleeding, really diminished. And so I would say for probably about 2 or 3 years after that, it was like, for probably about 2 years after that, the cycle was normal. And gradually I noticed 1 month it was very heavy, and then it just started slowly getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And I remember following up with the doctor, and she said, well, the thing with the myomectomy is that it might come back. The fibroids might come back. And so I was like, wow, I was really praying during this whole time, asking God for answers, praying for healing, asking God to help me with my job situation, help me with just my life situation, to just be able to function. Because during this whole time this was happening, I felt like I had lost some years, and I felt like I had lost a lot of time, because I was like in a fog, because I was so sick for so long. And so as the cycles started to get heavier and heavier again, I just remember thinking, wow, so what is this, And so let me just back up a little bit and say one thing, and this is important that I mention this. So before I had the surgery for the myomectomy, for them to remove the fibroids, I remember seeing the gynecologist at Leahy, and she's no longer there. And I remember her telling me, I have a very good doctor that can do the surgery for you, because the reason why, she talked about saving the uterus in case you want to have children. And I remember telling her, I said, she said, so if you want to get pregnant, you should probably do it sooner than later. And I remember telling her, I do want to have children, but I want to wait until I'm married. And she just was kind of stunned. And I said, I'm a Christian, and I believe in waiting for that right person to come along, and having children in the context of marriage. And I mention that because, just keep that in mind, because I will come back to that thought. And so, I remember her telling me, wow, I've never kind of heard anybody say that. And you know what, I kind of want that too. And so it just opened a door for me to just share with her about how God touched my life. And even though I was going through this difficult time, it didn't mean that God wasn't there, And so anyways, I had the surgery done. They removed 13 fibroids and went on with life. Eventually periods started getting very heavy again. And so by this time, a lot had changed in my life. And I was working at a new job. I had graduated. I was in school. I had gone back to college. I had purchased a home. I was just doing, just living life and doing all of these things because I was single for a very long time. But I realized that even though I was single and I wanted so much things, to happen in my life, I needed to live. I can't just sit around just waiting and not living. And so I went to school, I bought a home, I was just living, and but the cycle was getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And so eventually, through a process of time, I ended up adopting. And that is a whole other story of how that even happened. And that's a miracle in itself, like how it happened and what I went through and everything. But as it relates to the story, I ended up adopting. And I wasn't sent out to adopt. I honestly was just going about my day. And one phone call changed the entire direction of my life. And so I ended up adopting my 2 children from China. And when I came back, it was like someone turned on a faucet in my body, and I started bleeding almost to the point I was before, but then it even surpassed that, if that's possible. And I don't know if it was maybe the stress or what, but it was like somebody turned on a faucet. And along with the heavy bleeding came excruciating pain. It was like women have cramps during this time of the month. But I noticed that after I had had the surgery, along with the heavy bleeding came these heavy, painful cramps. I had never had cramps like what I was starting to experience. And it reached a point where I couldn't even get out of bed. And that sounds crazy, but I couldn't even get out of bed. It was so bad. And so I just started to wonder, like, what is wrong? Like, maybe it's all back, And so through a process of time, I ended up going, the kids and I was still living in Rhode Island, but I ended up moving to the Boston area, and I decided to go back and follow up with the doctor because during the time frame that I had the kids, I was so focused on them and their medical needs that I hadn't gone back to the doctor to try to follow up to figure out what happened. And so when I moved to the Boston area, I decided, you know what, I really need to see the doctor and find out what's going on.